My parents moved around a lot, and certainly family life was important too. Now, when they retired to Perth, and I guess those, I don't know whether you want to call them the shackles of work are gone. And that I saw that a lot in Perth, is that, a town of 5,000 people, and people who had recently retired taking the reins over certain activities. There was probably a core of a couple hundred people in town that were involved in most of the major activities. My dad very early on was one of the first ones there, and he was involved in setting up the equipment and making sure everything is set. And by the time he hit, my dad passed when he was 88, so by the time in his latter years, he was always there at the beginning, but it was more to make coffee, to greet people, to tell a joke, that sort of thing. Well, the presence is always there. It's the role, and maybe an expectation or just a general evolution that there's a constant stream of people coming coming into that group, and that to take on the various roles. My mom the same way. Well, I think, and that whether it's Perth or whether it's East York, and that those communities, the communities rely on volunteers, and that, but those community groups are important for everybody, and the leadership of that small core of people is benefits many. The interdependence of the various people on the committee and also within the community is important too.
Our community church, the United Church in South River, was amazing. They told us before we even realized how bad my dad was, because they'd see it. He was the usher every Sunday. And my mother would routinely, every once in a while, just slide out of her seat and end up in the hospital because she had low blood, and they'd pump her up with blood and she'd be fine. But the community was wonderful.
My mother was a very gregarious, very extroverted person. She was a very social person. And so for her, engaging with people in all different levels was very important. She had very good friends from Halifax, where she came to Toronto from Halifax at the end of her life. She had good friends there. So she worked the phones very well. She was that way. She was a very good communicator that way. But in her retirement residence, she made it a priority to engage with people there, get to know people. She was involved in activities. She wasn't a joiner in the sense of like joining organizations, but she was a joiner in the sense of she would go to special events at the residence. She would go to the annual general meeting for residents. She would ask questions. She went to near the end, she was going to a sing-along session every week when she would sing. So she would be involved in activities at the residence because for her, engaging with people, socializing with people was very meaningful to her, very helpful, very powerful for her. So she was a joiner in sort of a more informal social sense, as opposed to like joining organizations and things like that. But it was all very, very important to her. She could make friends in a phone box, my mom, and it was essential to her to engage socially, because to her, engaging socially was engaging with life in general. It took her a while to come around to that, but she came around. So when she came to the Chartwell, she was surrounded by her peers in the hallway and in the kitchen and in the coffee shop, and same stage of life. So for her, it vastly improved her quality of life. I think it improved her independence, her sense of independence. It made all the world a difference to her. So the last 5 years of her life were in a social milieu, a social environment, a very engaging, dynamic environment, as opposed to living by herself.
There is, and it's so important for a person, I think, as a senior, to be intentional about creating community outside of family. So many of the ones where I have experienced the real struggle are those who, have spent, their retirement winters in Florida, their summer months at a family cottage, but where they are going to need the help, they've only spent 2 or 3 months in the spring, 2 or 3 months in the fall, They don't have a church connection. They don't have any social clubs. They don't even know their neighbors well. And yeah, they will suffer for that. So to navigate it, make sure that you connect to the community when you can. You know, if you're not giving into the community, there won't be anyone there to give to you when you need it. Is too often the reality, and that's where someone like myself comes in. Yeah. Okay. It's out of the sense of ministry becomes a sense of obligation that okay, your need is not being met. Someone needs to step up. I think I would encourage children, significant people in the life of someone who is in need of elder care, and if they are not in proximity and able to offer that they find the courage to reach out to some of the community organizations that individual may have had a relationship with and be able to share, what can you do? And not leave that too late. I think that many times if a child had reached out to the church to say, hey, you know what, you may have noticed mom hasn't been there for the last 3 months. She can't drive anymore. Can someone do a regular visit? And it's like, oh yeah, we can make that connection and make it happen. In fact, she may not have been there for the last 3 years, but whatever. The child doesn't always know. But if it's left too late, then there's too much of a hurdle to overcome. There isn't anyone around that knows the person well enough to initiate the conversation. And then no volunteer is going to take that on. So that would be my encouragement. If you have someone that's in need of elder care and you are not able to do that, be proactive on their behalf to see if you can't find an organization that will make that connection. Either volunteer or through a staff arrangement. Yeah.